My name is Elizabeth Collins. I am 32 years old, and I live in a bustling city far from the family who disowned me. The golden doors of the Evergreen Resort Ballroom looked exactly the same as they did the night I left. But I was different. 11 years ago, I walked out of this building with a cheap suitcase and tears running down my face. Tonight, I walked in wearing a Valentino gown, holding the hand of my husband, Michael, and my son, Leo. I wasn't the failure daughter anymore. I was the CEO of a medical empire, but they didn't know that yet. I scanned the room. The music was loud, but my heart beat louder. Then I saw them. My sister, Grace, in her white dress. My father, Dennis, holding a glass of champagne. My mother, Margaret. Their eyes landed on me. The smiles dropped from their faces instantly. It was like seeing a ghost. My mother marched over, her face twisted in that familiar look of disgust. She didn't look at my beautiful gown or my happy family. She only saw the girl she threw away. "What are you doing here?" she hissed, her voice low and sharp. The room went quiet around us. She thought she could still hurt me. She had no idea who I had become. But before I tell you how everything flipped, like and subscribe, drop a comment. Where are you watching from? My name is Elizabeth Collins. I am 32 years old. My mother's hiss in the ballroom took me back instantly. It took me back to the worst night of my life. I was 21 years old. It was a Tuesday. It was raining hard against the windows of my parents' house. I remember the sound of the rain because it was the only sound in the room before the shouting started. I stood in the living room holding a piece of paper. It was a bank statement. My hands were shaking. I had gone to the bank that morning to pay my tuition for my final year of college. The teller looked at me with pity. She told me the account was empty. Zero. I walked home in a daze. When I walked into the house, my parents were sitting on the couch watching TV. Grace was there too. She was painting her nails on the coffee chair. She was 23 then, 2 years older than me, but she acted like a teenager. "Where is it?" I asked. My voice was small. My father didn't look away from the TV. "Where is what, Elizabeth?" "My college fund," I said. "The money Grandma left for my education. The account is empty." My mother finally looked up. She didn't look guilty. She looked annoyed. She took a sip of her tea and set the cup down slowly. "We had to move some things around," she said. "Move things around?" I stepped closer. "That was $40,000. That was for my degree. I have 1 year left. I can't register for classes without it." Grace blew on her nails. She looked bored. "God, Liz. Stop being so dramatic. It's just money." "It's not just money, Grace. It's my future," I yelled. My father stood up then. He was a big man, and when he was angry, he filled the room. "Do not raise your voice in this house, young lady." "You stole from me," I screamed. I couldn't stop myself. "Where did it go?" My mother stood up too. She smoothed down her skirt. Grace needed it. She was in a bad place. She needed a fresh start. We sent her to that wellness retreat in Bali, and then she needed a car to get to her internships. I looked at Grace. She was smirking. She hadn't had an internship in 3 years. She spent her time shopping and posting pictures online. "You spent my college tuition on a vacation for Grace?" I asked. I felt sick. My stomach twisted into a knot. "I have a 4 GPA. I am on the dean's list. Grace failed 3 classes last semester." "Grace is sensitive," my mother snapped. "She needs our support. You have always been. Harder, you can take care of yourself." "Grace needs help." "I can take care of myself," I laughed, but it sounded like a sob. "I am your daughter too. Why do you always choose her? Why does she get everything while I work my butt off?" "Because you are selfish," my father said. His voice was cold. "You have always been selfish. Calculating. You think you are better than us because you read your books and get your grades. You don't care about this family." "I don't care." Tears started to spill down my face. "I cook dinner 3 nights a week. I clean the house on weekends so you can rest. I work part-time at the library to pay for my own books. Grace doesn't do anything." "That is enough." My father pointed to the door. "If you think we are such terrible parents, if you think we are thieves, then you can leave. We don't want an ungrateful daughter in this house." I froze. "What?" "You heard your father," my mother said. She crossed her arms. "Get out. If you're so smart, go figure it out on your own." "It's storming outside," I said. "I have nowhere to go." "Not my problem," Grace said. She finally looked at me. Her eyes were cold. "Maybe you can sleep in the library." I looked at them. My mother, my father, my sister. They were a wall, a solid wall of rejection. They didn't love me. I realized it in that moment. They didn't just prefer Grace. They actively disliked me. I was a burden to them because I reminded them of what they weren't. I was responsible. They were reckless. I didn't say another word. I went to my room. I packed one suitcase. I took my clothes, my laptop, and a picture of my grandmother. I left everything else. When I walked back downstairs, they were watching TV again. They didn't look up. I opened the front door. The wind howled. Rain sprayed into the hallway. "Don't come back crawling when you fail," my father called out without turning his head. I stepped out and closed the door. I walked to the bus stop in the rain. I was soaked instantly. I sat on the cold metal bench and cried until my chest hurt. I had $50 in my pocket. I had no degree. I had no family. I was alone. The first night, I slept at a bus station. I was too scared to sleep, really. I just sat there, clutching my suitcase, watching people pass by. I felt like I had a sign on my forehead that said homeless or unwanted. The next day, I found a cheap motel on the edge of town. It cost $30 a night. It smelled like old cigarettes and mildew. The carpet was sticky, but it had a lock on the door. I sat on the bed and made a plan. I was not going to let them win. My father said I would come crawling back. I swore to myself, right there in that dirty room, that I would never ask them for a penny. I would rather starve than beg them for help. I needed money, fast. I walked to every business within 5 miles. I asked for work. A diner called Pete's Place hired me as a dishwasher and waitress. The owner, an old man named Pete, saw my suitcase and didn't ask questions. $7 an hour plus tips, he said. "You start now." I tied on an apron. I washed dishes until my hands were raw and red. I waited tables with a smile, even though I was exhausted. I picked up extra shifts whenever I could. I found a tiny studio apartment above a garage. It had no heating in the winter and no air conditioning in the summer. It was freezing cold and boiling hot. But it was mine. I couldn't afford to go back to my expensive university. That dream was dead. But I didn't stop learning. I enrolled in the local community college. It was cheaper. I took night classes. My schedule for 3 years was brutal. 5 a.m., wake up, study. 7 a.m., 3 p.m., shift at the diner. 4 p.m., 7 p.m., classes. 8 p.m., 12 a.m., shift at a cleaning service, scrubbing office floors. I was tired all the time. My bones ached. I ate instant noodles every single day because they cost 20 cents a pack. I lost weight. My clothes hung loose on my frame. I didn't have friends. I didn't have time for them. When Christmas came, I spent it alone in my apartment. I watched movies on my laptop and ate a sandwich. I imagined my family eating a big dinner, laughing, probably making fun of me. Remember Elizabeth, the dropout? It hurt. It hurt so much. But the pain became fuel. Every time I wanted to give up, I remembered Grace's smirk. I remembered my mother saying, "Grace needs help." I transferred to the state university after 2 years. I got a full academic scholarship because my grades were perfect. I worked harder than anyone else. I sat in the front row. I asked questions. During my final year, I had an idea. I was studying biomedical engineering. I noticed that patients recovering from surgery often had complications because doctors couldn't monitor them once they went home. I started sketching a device, a small patch. It would track vitals and send data directly to the doctor's phone. It was simple, but no one had done it well yet. I called it MUVA. I worked on the prototype in the university lab at night. I slept 3 hours a night. I met Michael during this time. He was a medical student. He saw me sleeping in the library one morning. He bought me a coffee. "You look like you carry the weight of the world," he said. He had kind eyes. "Just my own weight," I said. He didn't run away when I told him I had no money. He didn't judge me when I told him my family disowned me. He believed in me. When I showed him the MUVA prototype, he didn't say it was cute. He said, "This is going to change medicine." I graduated summa cum laude, top of my class. My parents weren't there. They didn't even know. Michael was there. He cheered so loud people turned to look. After graduation, I didn't get a job. I built my company. Michael and I lived in a tiny apartment. We ate cheap food. We put every dollar into MUVA. I pitched my idea to investors. Most of them were old men. They looked at me, a young woman in a cheap suit, and they said no. "It's too risky," they said. "You don't have experience." But I was used to rejection. Rejection was my native language. I didn't stop. I kept knocking on doors. Finally, one investor said yes. We launched the product. It exploded. Hospitals wanted it. Doctors loved it. It saved lives. The money started coming in. First a little, then a lot. We moved out of the tiny apartment. We bought a house. We got married. We had Leo. I was happy, truly happy. But in the back of my mind there was always a shadow. My family, they were still out there. They thought I was dead or in jail or working at a gas station. I never called them, I never checked on them. But I knew this day would come. When the invitation to Grace's wedding arrived at my old college address, which forwarded mail to me, I almost threw it away. It was addressed to Elizabeth Collins. Not Elizabeth Ross, my married name. They didn't know I was married. They didn't know I was a CEO. The invitation was a generic pity invite. If you are around, feel free to come. No request for an RSVP. They didn't expect me to show up. Michael saw me holding the invitation. Are you going? I looked at him. I looked at our beautiful home. I looked at the life I built with my own 2 hands. Yes, I said, it's time they met the real me. So here I was, 11 years of pain, work, and silence later. Standing in the ballroom, my mother stood in front of me, blocking my path. She was wearing a beige dress that probably cost more than my first car. Her face was tight with anger. She looked at me like I was a stain on her perfect white carpet. I asked you a question, she said, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper so the guests nearby wouldn't hear. What are you doing here? Who invited you? I received an invitation, I said calmly. I reached into my clutch purse. I didn't hand it to her, I just held it up. Addressed to Elizabeth Collins. My father stepped up beside her. He looked older. His hair was completely white now. He looked at Michael, then at Leo, and finally at me. He didn't look happy to see his grandson. He looked suspicious. We sent that out of courtesy, my father grumbled. We didn't think you would actually have the nerve to show up. Look at you, you're making a scene. I'm not making a scene, I said. I'm standing here. You look. My mother looked me up and down again. She seemed confused by my dress. It was a Valentino. It was elegant, dark green, and tailored perfectly to my body. It wasn't something a dropout waitress could afford. Did you rent that dress? Are you trying to beg for money? Because if you are here to ask for a handout, you can turn right around. Grace appeared behind them. She looked beautiful in her wedding dress, but her face was pale. She stared at me with wide eyes. She didn't look like a happy bride. She looked like a child who had been caught stealing cookies. Liz, she squeaked. Hello, Grace, I said. Congratulations. You need to leave, Grace said quickly. She looked around the room nervously. You don't belong here. This is a high society event, Liz. There are doctors here, important people. You're going to embarrass me. Embarrass you? I repeated. Yes, everyone knows you, failed. Grace nervously touched her hair. Just go, please. I'll give you some cash for a cab. She reached for her purse on a nearby table. She was trying to pay me to leave. Again, just like they paid for her to have everything while I had nothing. Before I could answer, Michael stepped forward. He placed a hand on the small of my back. His grip was warm and steady. Keep your money, Michael said. His voice was deep and projected well. He wasn't whispering. My wife doesn't need your cash. My father frowned at Michael. And who are you? I'm Michael Ross, he said. He extended a hand, but my father didn't take it. Michael dropped his hand but kept his chin up. And this is our son, Leo. You got married, my mother said with a sneer. I suppose that's one way to survive. Find a man to take care of you since you couldn't make it on your own. I felt a flash of anger, hot and sharp, but I pushed it down. I didn't need to yell anymore. I didn't need to scream over the rain. Actually, Michael said, cutting her off. I don't take care of her, we take care of each other, but if we are talking about who pays the bills, you should know who you are speaking to. We know who she is, Grace snapped. She's my dropout sister. She is the CEO of Muva, Michael said. He said it clearly. The words hung in the air. For 3 seconds there was silence. My father blinked. Muva. The medical company. The medical technology company, Michael corrected. The one that just signed a contract with every major hospital in the state. The one featured in Forbes last month. Elizabeth founded it. She built it. She runs it. My mother let out a short, nervous laugh. Don't be ridiculous, Elizabeth. She couldn't even finish college. Is that Elizabeth Collins? The voice came from behind me. A man in a tuxedo walked up. I recognized him immediately. It was Dr. Aris, the chief of surgery at St. Jude's Hospital. He was one of the most respected men in the room. He wasn't looking at Grace. He was looking at me. His face was lit up with a smile. It is you, Dr. Aris said. He reached out and shook my hand enthusiastically. I saw you walk in, but I wasn't sure. The lighting in here is terrible. Mrs. Ross, it is an honor, truly. My parents froze. They watched Dr. Aris shake my hand like I was royalty. Thank you, Dr. Eris, I said, smiling professionally. It's good to see you again. Did you receive the new prototype we sent over? I did, it's brilliant, he gushed. He turned to my parents, who stood with their mouths slightly open. You must be her parents. You must be incredibly proud. Muva has revolutionized how we handle post-op care. Your daughter is a genius. A literal genius. The color drained from my mother's face. She looked at Dr. Eris, then at me, then back at Dr. Eris. She tried to form a smile, but it looked like a grimace. Yes, of course, my father stammered. He looked lost. We didn't know she was active in the field, my mother said weakly. Active? Dr. Eris laughed. She owns the field. She's the keynote speaker at the National Medical Conference next month. I'm just hoping I can get a front row seat. More people were starting to look. The whisper Muva rippled through the crowd. In this room, filled with doctors and hospital administrators, Muva was a household name. It meant innovation. It meant money. It meant power. Grace stood there, gripping her bouquet so hard her knuckles were white. She looked small. Suddenly, her expensive wedding dress didn't look so impressive. Her important day was being overshadowed, and she knew it. I didn't know you knew Dr. Eris, Grace whispered to me. Her tone wasn't superior anymore, it was frightened. There is a lot you don't know, Grace, I said softly. My mother tried to recover. She stepped closer to me, her voice changing instantly. It became sickly sweet, the public voice she used to charm people. Elizabeth, darling, why didn't you tell us? She reached out to touch my arm. I took a half step back. Her hand fell to her side. Tell you? I asked. You told me to leave and never come back. You told me I was a failure. I just followed your instructions. Oh, don't be silly, she laughed nervously, glancing at Dr. Eris to see if he heard. Families fight. It's what we do, but look at you. You're a success. Dennis, look, our daughter is a CEO. My father puffed out his chest. Yes, well, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, does it? We always knew she had the drive. I stared at him. The audacity was breathtaking. They were trying to rewrite history in real time. They wanted to claim my success. They wanted to take credit for the woman I became, despite the fact that they had tried to destroy her. I didn't yell, I didn't call them liars in front of Dr. Eris. I just smiled, a cold, polite smile. I think the tree tried to chop the apple down, actually, I said pleasantly. My father choked on his drink. Dr. Eris looked confused for a moment, sensing the tension. Well, I don't want to intrude on a family reunion, but Elizabeth, please save a dance for me later. I have questions about the sensor integration. Of course, doctor, I said. He walked away. The circle around us felt different now. People were watching me with respect. They were watching my parents with confusion. Grace looked at her husband, Daniel, who was talking to a group of men across the room. She looked terrified that he would come over. Please, Grace hissed under her breath. Don't ruin this for me. Daniel comes from a very prominent family. If you make a scene... I'm just a guest, Grace, I said. Guests don't make scenes, they just exist. But my existence was the problem. My existence proved she was a liar. And as I looked at her shaking hands, I realized she knew it too. The reception dinner was starting. Waiters were moving around with silver trays. The noise level in the room was high, clinking glasses, laughter, music. Michael, Leo, and I were seated at a table near the back. My parents hadn't assigned us a table, obviously, so the wedding planner had frantically set up 3 extra spots at table 19, which was mostly filled with distant cousins who hadn't seen me since I was a teenager. They were polite but awkward. They asked what I did. When I told them I ran a tech company, they nodded politely, clearly not understanding the scale of it. I didn't explain. I just cut Leo's chicken for him and sipped my water. I saw Daniel, the groom, making his rounds. He was a tall man with kind eyes and a nervous smile. He looked like a good man. He was shaking hands, thanking people for coming. He worked his way toward table 19. When he got to us, he stopped. He looked at me, then at the name card on the table, Elizabeth Collins. He frowned. A look of genuine confusion crossed his face. He leaned in. Elizabeth? He asked. Grace's sister. I stood up to shake his hand. Yes, hello, Daniel, congratulations. He took my hand, but he didn't let go immediately. He was staring at me. I didn't think you were coming. Grace said. He stopped himself. He looked uncomfortable. What did Grace say? I asked. I kept my voice gentle. I wasn't angry at him. He was just another person Grace had manipulated. Daniel glanced toward the head table where Grace was laughing loudly with her bridesmaids. He looked back at me. She said you were. Unable to travel. She said you were in some kind of trouble. Financial trouble. She said she sent you money but you never responded. I felt Michael stiffen beside me. I placed a hand on his arm to calm him. Daniel, I said, Grace has never sent me money, not once. Daniel looked confused. But she told me about the college fund. She said you dropped out because you partied too much and failed your classes. She said her parents tried to help you, but you ran away. The lie was so specific. It was almost impressive. She had taken the truth and flipped it completely upside down. She projected her own failures onto me. Is that what she told you? I asked. Yeah, Daniel said. He looked at my dress. He looked at Michael's expensive watch. He looked at the way I held myself. But you don't look like someone in financial trouble. I'm not, I said. And Dr. Aris, Daniel continued, his brow furrowing. I saw him talking to you earlier. He looked like he knew you. He uses my company's technology, I said. Your company? Daniel asked. Muva, Michael said. He stood up too. Elizabeth is the founder and CEO of Muva. Daniel's jaw literally dropped. He was a doctor. He knew exactly what Muva was. You invented the remote post-op sensor. I did, I said. Daniel looked like he had been slapped. He stepped back, running a hand through his hair. I don't understand. Grace said you were a dropout. She said you weren't capable. I graduated summa cum laude from State University, I said. I worked 3 jobs to pay for it. I didn't have a college fund, Daniel. My parents took my college fund, $40,000, and used it to send Grace to a resort in Bali and buy her a car. Daniel stared at me. What? Ask her, I said calmly. Ask her about the storm in 2012. Ask her why I left with 1 suitcase. Ask her who actually failed their classes. Daniel looked at the head table again. Grace was drinking champagne. She looked carefree, but Daniel looked sick. The pieces were falling into place in his mind. She told me she graduated with honors, Daniel whispered. She told me she has a degree in biology. Does she? I asked. Have you ever seen her diploma? Daniel went pale. She talks about medical stuff, Daniel said, but he sounded like he was trying to convince himself. She knows the terminology. She listens to you, I said. She parrots what she hears. Grace is smart, Daniel. She is socially intelligent. She knows how to mirror people, but she doesn't know biology, and she certainly didn't graduate with honors. Daniel looked at me. His eyes were searching for a lie, but he couldn't find one. He saw the steady, calm truth in my face. He saw the successful woman standing in front of him, contradicted by the stories of a failure sister. Why? He asked. Why would she lie about you? Why would her parents go along with it? Because if I am the failure, they don't have to feel bad about what they did to me, I explained. And if I am the failure, Grace looks better by comparison. I was the scapegoat, Daniel. I have always been the scapegoat. Daniel looked down at his wedding ring. It was only a few hours old. He looked devastated. I married a stranger, he whispered. You married a version of her, I said. But the foundation is cracked. Daniel, Grace's voice rang out from the head table. She was standing up, waving a glass. Come here, we need to cut the cake. Daniel flinched at the sound of her voice. He looked at her, then back at me. The kindness in his eyes was replaced by a hard, cold resolve. He was a man of science. He dealt in facts. And he had just realized his entire relationship was built on a hypothesis that had been proven false. Excuse me, Daniel said. His voice was flat. He didn't walk back to the head table with a smile. He walked with a stiff, angry stride. He didn't go to the cake. He walked straight up to Grace. I sat back down. Michael took my hand under the table. He knows, Michael said. Yes, I replied. He knows. I watched them. Daniel was saying something to Grace. Grace's smile faltered. She laughed, trying to brush it off, touching his chest. Daniel pulled away. My parents noticed. They leaned in, looking worried. The room was still loud, but for Grace, the silence was beginning. The unraveling had started, and I didn't have to do anything but sit there and drink my water. The truth was a heavy thing, and Grace had been carrying a lie for too long. Her back was about to break. The tension at the table was thick. Michael was eating his dinner calmly, but his eyes were sharp. He was watching everything. Leo was playing with a bread roll, blissfully unaware that his mother's past was exploding a few tables away. I watched Daniel. He didn't make a scene immediately. He was smarter than that. He was a doctor, a man of science. He wanted empirical evidence. He wanted to test his hypothesis in front of peers. He guided Grace over to a group of men standing near the bar. I recognized them. Two of them were board members at the hospital where Daniel worked. Another was a visiting specialist from Chicago. These were serious men. I saw Daniel whisper something to them. The men looked surprised, then interested. They turned their eyes to Grace. Grace was smiling, holding her champagne glass, playing the part of the perfect doctor's wife. She thought she was being introduced as a peer. She had no idea she was being walked into a trap. I stood up. "I want to hear this," I whispered to Michael. We walked over slowly, pretending to get drinks from the bar. We stood close enough to hear every word. "Grace," Daniel said, his voice loud enough to carry over the jazz music. Dr. Evans here was just discussing the latest research on cellular regeneration. I told him about your thesis at Stanford. The one on, what was it again? Mitosis variants. Grace froze. Her smile stayed plastered on her face, but her eyes darted around like a trapped animal. "Oh, Daniel," she laughed, a high-pitched, brittle sound. "Not tonight, it's our wedding. No shop talk. It's so boring for everyone." "Nonsense," Dr. Evans said. He was a gray-haired man with thick glasses. "I would love to hear about it. Daniel says you graduated with honors. Stanford has a rigorous program." It was a long time ago," Grace stammered. She took a large gulp of champagne. "I've been so focused on other things lately. Charity work. You know, but surely you remember your thesis topic," Daniel pressed. He wasn't smiling anymore. His face was like stone. "You told me it was published. I've been trying to find it online to show my colleagues, but I couldn't locate it." "Which journal was it in?" The circle of people around them grew quiet. Guests nearby stopped talking. They sensed the change in the air. It wasn't a friendly conversation anymore. It was an interrogation. My parents, who had been hovering nearby, sensing trouble, stepped in. "Daniel, really," my mother said, placing a hand on his arm. "Grace is tired. She's had a long day. Let's not grill the bride." "I'm just proud of my wife," Daniel said, shaking my mother's hand off. He didn't look at her. He kept his eyes on Grace. "I want everyone to know how smart she is. Go on, Grace. Explain the core concept of your degree." Grace's face turned bright red. Sweat started to bead on her forehead. She looked at me. She saw me standing there, watching her. For a second, her eyes pleaded with me. "Help me." I didn't move, I didn't speak, I just watched. I don't feel well," Grace whispered. "Stanford doesn't offer a remote biology degree, Grace," Daniel said. His voice was like a whip crack. The silence in the room was absolute now. Even the band seemed to have quieted down. "What?" Grace whispered. "I called the registrar this morning," Daniel lied. Or maybe he didn't, maybe he just knew. "I wanted to surprise you with a framed copy of your diploma since you said you lost yours. They have no record of you, Grace. No Grace Collins, no degree, no honors." "There must be a mistake," my father blustered. He stepped forward, his face purple. "How dare you? On her wedding day." "How dare I?" Daniel turned on my father. "You told me she was the scholar. You told me Elizabeth was the failure. You sat in my living room and told me stories about Grace's late nights studying. Were you lying too, Dennis?" My father opened his mouth, but no words came out. He looked at Grace, waiting for her to come up with a lie to save them, but Grace had run out of lies. "I took classes," Grace shouted suddenly. She sounded hysterical. "I did. I took online courses. It's the same thing." "It is not the same thing as a degree from Stanford," Daniel shouted back. "And you didn't just lie about school. You lied about everything. You lied about your sister." Daniel pointed at me. Every head in the room turned to look at me. "That is Elizabeth," Daniel announced to the room. "The woman you all said was a dropout junkie. That is the CEO of Movatech. She designs the equipment half of you doctors use in your operating rooms." Gasps rippled through the crowd. I saw Dr. Eris nod solemnly. "She is the success," Daniel said, his voice breaking. "And you are the fraud." Grace burst into tears. It wasn't a pretty cry, it was an ugly, heaving sob. She dropped her champagne glass. It shattered on the marble floor, the sound echoing like a gunshot. "I hate you," she screamed at Daniel. Then she turned and screamed at me. "I hate you, you ruined everything." She gathered up her heavy skirts and ran. She pushed through the crowd, knocking into a waiter, and fled toward the double doors. My parents stood there, exposed. People were staring at them with open disgust. They looked small. They looked pathetic. I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was Michael. "Do you want to leave?" he asked. "Not yet," I said. "I have to use the restroom." I walked to the ladies' room. The hallway was quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos in the ballroom. I could hear the muffled sound of sobbing coming from inside. I pushed the door open. It was a fancy restroom with velvet couches and gold mirrors. Grace was standing by the sinks. She was splashing water on her face, ruining her professional makeup. Her mascara was running down her cheeks in black streaks. She looked like a nightmare version of a bride. She saw me in the mirror. She spun around. Water dripped from her chin onto her dress. "Get out," she screamed. "Get out, haven't you done enough?" I walked in and let the door close behind me. I locked it. "I haven't done anything, Grace," I said. My voice was calm. It scared her. She was used to me yelling, crying, begging. She didn't know how to handle this version of me. "You showed up," she accused. "You showed up in that dress with your rich husband, acting like you're so better than everyone. You did this on purpose. You wanted to humiliate me." "I came to my sister's wedding," I said. "I was invited." "You know we didn't want you here," she shrieked. She grabbed a paper towel and scrubbed at her face violently. "We only sent the invite so Dad could say he tried. You were supposed to stay away. You were supposed to be the loser." "Why?" I asked. I leaned against the marble counter. I crossed my arms. "Why was it so important for me to be the loser, Grace? You had everything. You had the parents' love. You had the money. You had the vacations. Why did you need to destroy my reputation too?" Grace glared at me. Her chest was heaving. "Because you made me look bad," she spat. "Even when we were kids, you were always reading. You were always getting A's. Mom and Dad would look at you, and then they would look at me, and I could see it in their eyes. They wished I was smart like you." "So you stole my college fund?" I asked. "I deserved it," she yelled. "I needed a break, I was stressed. And you didn't need help, you always figure things out. You're like a cockroach, Elizabeth, you always survive." "I survived because I had to," I said, cold as ice. "I ate noodles for 3 years. I scrubbed toilets. I slept in a room with no heat while you were in Bali. And look at you now," she gestured wildly at my Valentino gown. "You're rich, you won. So why are you torturing me?" "I'm not torturing you," I said. "I'm just letting people see the truth. You built a life on lies, Grace. You married a man who fell in love with a fake person. You lied about your degree. You lied about me. Did you really think you could keep it up forever?" "I could have," she cried, "if you hadn't come back." "No," I shook my head. "Daniel isn't stupid. He would have found out eventually. And when he did, he would have left you. Maybe with a baby involved. Maybe 10 years later. I actually did you a favor. I ended it early." Grace slumped against the sink. She looked defeated. The fight was draining out of her. "He's going to leave me," she whispered. "He's going to annul the marriage." "Probably," I said. "My life is over," she sobbed. "Mom and Dad, they're going to be so mad at me. They hate looking bad." "They don't hate you, Grace," I said. "They are just like you. They enabled you. They created this monster. They are just as guilty." Grace looked up at me. Her eyes were red and swollen. Can you talk to him? He listened to you. Tell him I'm sorry. Tell him I'll get a degree. Please, Liz, help me just this once." It was the same pattern. Hurt me, then beg me for help. Kick me out, then ask for a favor. I looked at my sister. I looked at the person who watched me walk out into a storm with no money and didn't lift a finger. "No," I said. Grace blinked. "What? No," I repeated. "I won't fix this for you. I won't talk to him. I won't give you money. I won't lie for you." "But we're family," she wailed. "Family doesn't treat people the way you treated me," I said. "I have a family, Grace. His name is Michael, and Leo. You are just a relative. And a stranger." I pushed off the counter. I adjusted my dress. "Good luck, Grace," I said. I turned and walked out. She screamed my name as I left, but I didn't stop. I didn't look back. When I walked back into the ballroom, the atmosphere had completely shifted. Before, it was a wedding. Now, it was a crime scene. Groups of people were whispering, huddled together. The music had stopped. The cake sat uncut in the corner, looking ridiculous. My parents were sitting at their table. They were alone. No one was sitting with them. People were actively avoiding their side of the room. My mother was clutching her purse, staring straight ahead, her face a mask of shock. My father was drinking heavily. When I walked in, heads turned. But this time, the looks weren't judgmental. They were respectful. Some looked apologetic. I walked toward Michael and Leo. "Is she okay?" Michael asked. "She's crying," I said. "She'll survive." "Mrs. Ross," I turned. It was Dr. Evans, the man Daniel had spoken to earlier. He looked embarrassed. "I just wanted to apologize," he said. He held his hands together awkwardly. We were told a very different story about you. Daniel's in-laws, your parents. They painted a very specific picture. I feel foolish for believing it without meeting you." "It's not your fault, Dr. Evans," I said politely. Liars can be very convincing, especially when they are your parents. Well, he cleared his throat. I know this isn't the time, but the board is very interested in the MOVA sensors for our pediatric unit. Perhaps we could set up a meeting next week, under better circumstances. Call my office on Monday, I said. My assistant will set it up. He nodded, shook my hand and walked away. I looked over at my parents. My mother saw me. She stood up. She started walking toward me. She had that look in her eye, the look that said she was going to try to manipulate the situation. She was going to try to smooth it over. She reached me and tried to smile. It was grotesque. Elizabeth, she said breathless. Thank goodness you're back. Grace is. Well, she's having a moment. High emotions, you know. But listen, we need to do damage control. Daniel is furious. You need to go talk to him. Tell him it was a misunderstanding. Tell him Grace did take those classes, but maybe there was a paperwork error. I stared at her. I couldn't believe it. Even now, with the wreckage all around her, she wanted me to lie. Are you serious? I asked. Elizabeth, please, she lowered her voice. This is embarrassing for the family. If Daniel leaves her, it will be a scandal. We have a reputation in this town. You have a reputation, I corrected her. I don't live here. Don't be spiteful, my father joined us. He smelled like scotch. We are your parents. You owe us some loyalty. We raised you. You raised me until I was 21, I said. Then you threw me out like garbage. You stole my money. You erased me. We did what we thought was best, my mother snapped. Grace needed us more. And now she needs you again, I said. Go comfort her. She's in the bathroom crying because her husband found out she's a fraud. Go fix it. That's what you do, right? You fix Grace. You are a cold-hearted bitch, my father snarled. Michael stood up. He towered over my father. He didn't say a word. He just stepped between me and him. My father took a step back, intimidated. I think we're done here, I said. I looked around the room. I saw Daniel sitting alone on the stage, head in his hands. I saw the guests ignoring my parents. I saw the ruin of their perfect image. I realized something then. I didn't feel angry anymore. I didn't feel hurt. I felt free. For 11 years, I had carried the weight of their rejection. I had wondered if maybe I was unlovable. Maybe I was difficult. But standing there, watching them panic because their lies were exposed, I saw the truth. They were weak people. They were small, scared people who lived in a fantasy world. And I was real. Michael, I said, let's go. Gladly, he said. He picked up Leo, who was starting to fall asleep. Wait, my mother called out. She sounded desperate now. Elizabeth, don't walk away. We can discuss this. We can work something out. She probably wanted to ask for money, or maybe she just didn't want to be left alone with the mess she made. I didn't answer. I took Michael's hand. We walked through the center of the ballroom. The guests parted for us like the Red Sea. They watched us with admiration. I held my head high. My Valentino dress rustled softly. I walked past the table where I had been assigned, table 19, and past the head table where I should have been sitting. I walked toward the exit. The golden doors were open. The night air was waiting. We stepped out of the heavy glass doors of the Evergreen Resort and into the night air. It was crisp and cold. It smelled like pine needles and rain. It was the exact same smell as the night I left 11 years ago. But everything else was different. 11 years ago, I walked out of a door like this with a cheap suitcase, shivering in a thin jacket, terrified of where I would sleep. I had $50 to my name. I felt like the smallest person in the world. I felt like garbage. Tonight, I walked out holding the hand of a man who worshipped me. My son was sleeping soundly in his father's arms, safe and loved. A valet was already jogging toward us to bring our car. The silence outside was beautiful. Inside the ballroom, my family was imploding. Inside, there was screaming, crying, and the shattering of a fake life. But out here, it was just quiet. I took a deep breath. I filled my lungs with the cold air. I waited for the pain. I waited to feel sad. I waited for that old, familiar voice in my head that used to say, "Why don't they love me? What is wrong with me?" But the voice didn't come. Instead, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. It was a physical sensation. It felt like I had been carrying a heavy backpack full of rocks for a decade, and I had finally just dropped it on the ground. Michael looked at me as the valet pulled up in our car. He placed Leo gently into the car seat in the back. Then he turned to me. "Are you okay?" he asked. His eyes were searching my face. He was ready to comfort me. He was ready to hold me if I cried. I looked at him and smiled. It was a real smile. "I'm not just okay, Michael," I said. "I'm done." "Done? I'm free," I said. I spent so long trying to prove them wrong. I spent so long hoping that one day they would see me, that they would apologize, that they would realize what they lost. I looked back at the glowing windows of the ballroom. I could see silhouettes of people moving around frantically. But tonight, I continued, I realize they aren't capable of it. They are broken people. They aren't powerful monsters. They are just sad, small liars. And I don't need anything from them. Not their love, not their approval. Not even their apology. Michael smiled. He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. You didn't just survive them, Liz, he whispered. You rose above them. You are miles above them. Let's go home, I said. We got into the car. As we drove away, I watched the resort disappear in the rearview mirror. I didn't look back with longing. I didn't look back with anger. I looked back like you look at a house you used to live in a long time ago, a place that holds memories but isn't your home anymore. My phone started buzzing in my purse. I pulled it out. It was a text from my mother. Elizabeth, you can't just leave. We need to present a united front. Daniel is talking about an annulment. Come back and help us fix this. Then another one from my father. Ungrateful girl, you ruined your sister's night. I looked at the messages. In the past, these words would have cut me like a knife. They would have made me cry for days. Now, they just looked like words on a screen. I pressed the block button on my mother's number. Then I pressed block on my father's number. Then Grace. I put the phone back in my purse. Who was that? Michael asked, glancing over from the driver's seat. Nobody, I said, just spam. I reached back and held Leo's tiny hand in the car seat. He squeezed my finger in his sleep. I had my family. I had my empire. I had my truth. I closed my eyes and let the hum of the engine lull me into a peaceful silence. The fallout happened quickly, just as I predicted. 2 weeks after the wedding, the news reached me through the grapevine of the medical community. Daniel had filed for an annulment on the grounds of fraud. It was granted almost immediately. He was a respected doctor, and the evidence was overwhelming. Grace had never graduated from Stanford. She had never even enrolled. The scandal was the talk of the town for about a month. In their high society circle, reputation is everything. My parents, who had spent their whole lives trying to look perfect, were suddenly the pariahs. They stopped getting invited to galas. Their friends stopped calling. They tried to reach me, of course. My mother sent letters to my office. I recognized her handwriting on the envelopes instantly. Elizabeth, please, we are family. We are suffering. We need financial help to deal with the legal fees. Grace is in a bad way. I didn't open them. I put them directly into the shredder. I wasn't being cruel. I was protecting my peace. I knew that if I opened that door even a crack, they would flood in with their toxicity. They would drain me dry and then blame me for being empty. I had set a boundary, and for the first time in my life, I respected myself enough to keep it. About 2 months after the wedding, my assistant buzzed me. Miss Collins, Dr. Daniel Brooks is here to see you. He has an appointment. I stiffened slightly. Send him in. Daniel walked into my office. He looked different than he had at the wedding. He looked tired, but he also looked clearer. He wasn't wearing a tuxedo. He was wearing a suit and a doctor's coat. He stopped in the doorway and looked around. My office was glass and steel, overlooking the city skyline. It was a symbol of everything I had built. It's an impressive view, he said. It helps me think, I replied. I stood up and gestured to a chair. Please sit down, Daniel. He sat. He held a folder in his lap. I'm not here to talk about them, he said. Good, I said. I'm here about the pediatric sensors, he said, tapping the folder. Dr. Evans told me you were open to a partnership with St. Jude's. I wanted to present the proposal personally. We talked business for 20 minutes. He was professional, sharp, and intelligent. He treated me with absolute respect. He treated me as a CEO, not as a failure sister. When we were done, he stood up to leave. At the door, he paused. She's back living with them, he said quietly. I didn't have to ask who he meant. Grace, he continued. She's back in her old room. Your parents are, well, they are miserable. They blame everyone but themselves. Mostly they blame you. I imagine they would, I said calmly. I just wanted to say, Daniel turned to face me. I'm sorry I believed them. I'm sorry I didn't check the facts earlier. You didn't deserve that. Thank you, Daniel, I said, but you don't have to apologize. You were a victim of their lies too. He nodded. You were right, about family. What do you mean? Family isn't blood, he said. Family is the people who tell you the truth, the people who actually show up. He left. I walked to the window and looked out at the city. I thought about Grace. She was back in that house, trapped in the same cycle of dysfunction with my parents. They would spend the rest of their lives making each other miserable, feeding off each other's bitterness, rewriting history to make themselves the heroes. I felt a pang of pity for them, but I didn't feel responsible for them. I turned back to my desk. I had work to do. That afternoon, I had a meeting with a group of scholarship students. I had started a new program through MOVA. It was called the Second Chance Initiative. It provided full tuition and mentorship for young women who had been cut off by their families or who had faced financial crises that forced them to drop out of college. I walked into the conference room. 10 young women were sitting there. They looked nervous. They were wearing cheap suits like the one I used to wear. They looked tired like I used to look. When I walked in, they sat up straighter. "Good afternoon," I said. "I'm Elizabeth." I sat down at the head of the table. "I want to hear your stories," I told them. "I want to know where you want to go, and then I'm going to help you get there." One girl, a young woman with dark circles under her eyes, raised her hand. "Miss Collins," she said softly, "why are you doing this? You're a CEO. Why do you care about us?" I looked at her. I saw myself in her eyes. I saw the girl sitting at the bus stop in the rain. "Because I know what it's like to be told you're nothing," I said. "And I know that the best revenge isn't anger. The best revenge is success." I smiled at them. "But more importantly," I added, "I know that sometimes you have to build your own family from scratch. And you have to build your own future. I'm just here to give you the bricks." The girl smiled back. It was a hopeful smile. I went home that night to a house filled with noise. Michael was cooking dinner, something that smelled like garlic and rosemary. Leo was running around in a superhero cape, chasing the dog. I walked into the kitchen. Michael turned and kissed me. "How was your day?" he asked. "It was perfect," I said. And it was. I didn't have the family I was born into. I didn't have the mother who baked cookies or the father who gave me away at my wedding. I didn't have the sister who was my best friend. But I had this. I had truth. I had loyalty. I had a love that I earned and a love that was real. I picked up Leo and spun him around until he giggled. My parents had cast me out into the storm hoping I would drown. They never understood that the storm was where I learned how to swim. And now, I wasn't just swimming.